Katherine Bilsborough's session on how to help teachers find, create, recycle, and adapt good quality teaching materials. Katherine is here from Spain, but she's originally from Wales. She's been teaching for about 30 years now, so she's got a huge wealth of experience in teaching. She is a specialist teacher trainer and a materials writer, and she works as a freelance consultant with the British Council. This is her first time in Hyderabad, her first time in India, and her first time in Asia. So we're very happy to have her here, although she looks really lovely in an Indian kurta. This is her first time here, and please put your hands together and give her a warm welcome. Thank you very much. Over to you, Katherine.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, first I'd like to say thank you to the British Council for inviting me to the conference. And secondly, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for being here today. It's a privilege and an honour for me. As Sam said, it's my first time in Hyderabad, my first time in India, my first time in Asia, and it's just incredible. It's just incredible. So thank you very, very much. I'd like to say hello to those colleagues who are watching us on the internet. Good morning, good afternoon, etc. And I think we'll start, okay? This is what we're talking about today. This is what I'm talking about. And I'd like you to put your hands up if you notice any error in that slide. Thank you. Thank you. Do you know what happened? I added an extra slide to my slideshow about 5 minutes before I came in here. This is it. And I sat down there quite happily, and Anil, where's Anil? Anil came over to me and said, "Are you happy with that slide?" So I had a look, and I thought, oh, and my first reaction was, oh, I'm so glad you told me. Now I can change it immediately before everybody else comes in. But then I decided to leave it there because I'm going to be talking later about how we need to help our teachers notice things. And Anil noticed immediately that I was missing a comma, okay? And that is quite a good sign, I think, yeah, because noticing things is very important. Okay, I'm going to... This is supposed to be a workshop, okay? So I'm going to be asking you at various points during the session to maybe talk about a couple of things, discuss a couple of things. And I would like to start by asking you for just 1 minute to please introduce yourselves to the people around you, next to you, behind you, those people who you don't know, because when I ask you to talk to the people later, I don't want you to be complete strangers. So I'd like you to just spend 1 minute asking each other's names, where you're from, just saying hello, and then we'll start. Okay? Okay, thank you. I'll continue now. It would be nice to just sit and chat, wouldn't it? Okay, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself first. I've been teaching for about 30 years, as Sam said. when I started teaching English in Spain, there were very few materials available. Very few materials available. There were a couple of course books, maybe a couple of resource books, but nothing like the wealth of materials that are available today. My teaching context was a little bit not special. It was the same as everybody else teaching in Spain at that time. I was mainly teaching private classes. So I might have a class at about 7 o'clock in the morning with a businessman from a company. Then I might have a lunchtime class with a group of secretaries from an office. Maybe 5 to 6, I'd teach some 6-year-olds, 7 till 8, maybe their older brothers, 8 till 9, maybe their dad. So all of my classes, I don't think I had 2 classes that were the same, and very few materials. So I had to create my own materials. And I think most teachers, when they started out at that period of time, probably did the same. So I would just, for example, if my businessmen needed to talk about or have a business meeting, I'd find something that would be suitable for them, etc., etc. And I think I probably spent about 2 or 3 hours making materials for each of my classes. So I was working hundreds of hours, but I liked it. I think that creating the materials was probably one of the best, the nicest parts of my job. And I think, thinking back about my own professional development, I think that probably during those early years when we had no materials, my professional development came from my having to create materials for my classes. Because when you create materials for your classes, you have to think about so many things that have an effect on your teaching practice. You have to think about their level, you have to think about their interests, you have to think about the interaction that you're going to have, and a whole wealth of things that are sometimes covered in other aspects of teacher training courses. So I think that when you have a workshop on materials writing with a group of teachers, you're not only showing them how to develop materials, you're also looking at a whole lot of other things. So that's where I'm coming from today, okay? This is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about these things, okay? I won't read it all out, but they're the steps we're going to take today, okay? I'm going to start straight away by talking about the growing interest in materials writing, okay? In the last couple of years, there has been an incredible growth of interest in materials writing on the part of teachers. And I'm not talking about people who want to make a living writing books or course books. I'm talking about teachers who want to create their own materials for their own classes and their own contexts. As Rod Pytho mentioned the first day in his plenary, do you remember? He said, ask for evidence. Ask for evidence. Well, I'm going to give you some evidence now. The Moore SIG is the Materials Writers Special Interest Group at IATEFL. It's the youngest SIG. This year, it will be 2 years old. But it's the fastest growing membership SIG. In the first year, it went from 0 to about 350, which doesn't sound a lot, but apparently it's midway with all the other SIGs, which is quite impressive, actually. And most of the people who are a member of this group, they are teachers who want to create materials for their lessons. They're not people who are looking for a career path, okay? But that is an option as well, of course, for some people. One of the themes of this conference is quality. And recently, something else has been happening at the same time as this interest in materials creation. And a group of materials writers, myself included, we started off having a chat on social media, complaining, some people were complaining, because a lot of their materials were being downloaded illegally in different places, and there was all kinds of problems with copyright, etc., and it became a big issue. But we also realized that at the same time, there is a need for free materials. And unfortunately, on the internet, because there are so many things available these days, there are a lot of materials available freely which are not of a very good quality, I'm sorry to say, and this is the reality. And we were talking about, how do teachers know when it's good quality? How can we know what's good? Obviously, if we go to a website that belongs to the British Council, for example, we know that there's going to be a standard and but if we move away from there, and if we look for materials elsewhere, how can we check? So we've set up a group, and it's called Free and Fair Language Teaching Resources. This is on Facebook at the moment, so if anybody's on Facebook, please look for us, and we share a free resource every week, and we quality control those resources, so we make sure that they are absolutely fine. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about quality in a second, but that's a good starting point to go for resources for teachers. Try to have as much variety as possible, so we post materials for primary, for secondary, for business classes. One of the most popular shares was some materials for preparation for IELTS. Exam materials are always popular. And it's a place to go. You can look through and find all kinds of fantastic resources. Another thing that we decided to do in our group of materials, as we realized that more and more people wanted to create their own materials, and there's actually very little out there to help people, we decided to self-publish free book for purpose. So contributed to the writing of this book, but top writers in ELT, each a chapter, how to write vocabulary exercises, how to write rubrics, and it's really, really helpful. This is one of the resources on the Free and Fair site. So if you go there, you can click and download it as a PDF. I'm going to put my email on the last slide too. So if anybody isn't on, if you get in touch, I'll send you the PDF, okay? And it's useful. The fourth picture I've got on there, I don't know if anybody was in the talk yesterday when they mentioned these teaching English materials for teacher training. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end, okay? And I've put this on here because I think it ties in with the whole thing about materials. Okay. Okay. One of the great advantages, of course, for teachers creating their own materials for their classes is that we can make made-to-measure materials. Sometimes the materials that we have are not appropriate for one reason or another. Sometimes we have no materials. There's a great imbalance, I think. Some people have access to the internet and can get loads of things. Other people don't, and they're trying to make do. And I think if we can help our teachers create their own materials made to measure, as I said before, we'll be helping them to develop lots of language practice skills, lots of teaching skills, and at the same time we'll be helping them to help their students. So we'll look at this in a little bit more detail. I've put this up here because I think for me, the most important thing when we create materials is for the materials to be simple. There's a tendency sometimes to try to be too clever or too much. And I like these definitions because they really are where I'm coming from. And I think that materials should be easy to understand, not complicated, very simple design. We don't need all that extra stuff. I've left that third definition of simple there because I thought I'd share a little anecdote with you. My very first teaching job in a school, in a language school in Spain, I had an interview with the director who was Spanish, and she asked me about my experience. She had my CV, and we were talking, and we were speaking in English. And at the end of the interview, she said, "I'm very happy to offer you a job. I like you, Katherine, because you're very simple." And I thought, what? And now I think I know what she means, because I think that my approach to teaching and my approach to materials writing is try to make it as simple as possible. There's no need to try to be too clever about things. So, when we talk about materials writing, and when we help our teachers to create materials, I think that a very good starting point is the whole theoretical background that we use for lesson plans. It's just taking it one step further. So this is the lesson plan. This is Jim Scrivener's model, which I was taught on my training course. And I think it's perfectly, it adapts perfectly to the creation of materials. Because while we're creating materials, while the teachers are creating materials, they need to be visualized in the classes and thinking about predicting what's going to happen, anticipating, sequencing, etc. So this is the model, if you like, that I use when I create materials. I've tried to identify what, for me, are the most important aspects of quality when it comes to teaching materials. Okay? I might have missed one out. I might have added one in that shouldn't be there, and you might have other ideas. Okay? This is a personal thought on the matter. So I've got 8 things that I think we need to consider. And we're just going to look at them briefly, one by one. So, the first thing to consider is the level. Are the materials the appropriate level? And again, this is Krashen's idea of the input level that we should be using. So, a little bit higher than the student's own level. Finding the level of your students and creating materials for the right level is not an easy business. It's not an easy business. And I think that helping our teachers to develop materials, leveling is an issue that is probably going to be complicated. It's not easy to get it right. And this is where we start. It's a very important matter. Okay, secondly, good English. So Amil pointed out that my English wasn't particularly good on that first slide. I made a classic comma mistake, not an apostrophe mistake. That might have been worse. But when I talk about good English, what I mean is it's correct, it's grammatically correct, the punctuation is okay. It doesn't matter what type of English. If you use an American English, for example, I think consistency is the key word, okay? And the next thing, that visually pleasing. What I mean by this is, again, coming back to simplicity. What do the materials look like? Do they look nice? Will they be engaging for the students? Are they attractive? Or are they all over the place? And some people are good at that kind of thing, and some people are not so good. Talk about that again in a second. Number 4, useful language. It's common sense. Yeah, the language has to be useful. If your teachers are creating materials for their own students, then it is a perfect opportunity to give them the most useful language that they need. They might be using a course book as well, but they might need some extra things that are not in the course book, and this is an opportunity for giving them the useful language. Number 5 is a big one. It's a very important one. Appropriate content. I've got a picture of some parsnips there. Does anybody know why? Put your hands up if you've heard of this acronym, parsnips, okay? Couple of people, but not too many. That's good. Okay, parsnips, each of those letters refers to a noun, and they are 7 things that we are told as materials writers that we should never include in materials because we don't want to offend anybody. So in a minute, I'll tell you what those letters stand for. But first of all, please, I'm going to ask you with the people around you just to have a chat and see if you can think of what any of those words might be, things that are taboo in the class. So I'll give you 2 minutes to have a little chat. Okay, I'll put you out of your misery. Here we are. Okay, so these no-nos, these taboos, are usually imposed by people very high up. Publishers are very, very careful about this kind of thing. Usually, when we are talking about writing materials for a global market, because what might be acceptable in one context might be very offensive in another context. So these are guidelines, if you like. And there's a big debate about this, because some people believe that we shouldn't avoid these issues, in fact, that we should be talking about them. What I believe is that teachers should be comfortable with the materials that they are using, and that nobody should ever be in danger of being offended by the materials. That's basic common sense, yeah? So some of these things you might feel strongly about, and some less strongly. But the beauty about creating materials, of course, for your own classes, or for your teachers for their own classes, is that they will be able to decide which of these issues are no-no and which of them are actually okay, yeah? So, but it's something to bear in mind, the appropriacy. The next thing is also very, very important. Okay, can you all read that? No? Sir, can you read? No? Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay. You couldn't read that because it's not accessible. That's an extreme example. I hope you wouldn't put something like that for your trainee teachers. When we talk about accessibility, it's a huge area, and if you're interested in it, it's just a big, big area. What we're talking about in this context is making sure that your teachers, if they are creating materials for their students, they have to make sure that they are accessible for every person in that room. So there might be somebody who is visually impaired, who might need to have bigger text. There might be somebody who has a problem. There are things, I'm not an expert on accessibility, there are guidelines, but certain colours work okay together with text, other colours are difficult for people to perceive. And we don't see that ourselves sometimes. So it's something to think about and talk about, because sometimes if one person in the class cannot access that material in the same way as everybody else, there's something very wrong going on. It's not fair, is it? So accessibility is a big one. The next one is clear rubrics. Rubrics are a huge, huge issue. Lots of editors have told me over the years that one of the big problems they often have with writers is the rubrics, okay? So have a look at this rubric. Have a look at it. And just tell the person next to you if you think that's okay, if there's anything wrong with it. What do you think of that rubric? Obviously, you haven't got the exercise there. You've just got the rubric. Tell the person next to you what you think about that. Okay, I can hear what some of you are saying, and I've seen people showing. Each instruction, if you like, is fine, but there are far too many things going on. There are far too many things going on because the students, you can imagine it, can't you? Just put yourself, and I'm just thinking of my students, by the time they get to the second sentence, they forgot what the first thing, it's inevitable that they will miss out something from that sequence, okay? So rubrics have to be broken down. And I think that one interesting activity that you can do with teachers in a teacher training section is to actually get them to analyse rubrics. And one thing I've done in the past is I've given out exercises without the rubrics, and I've asked the teachers to please write the rubrics for those exercises. And it seems very simple, but it throws up all kinds of things because they all come out with different rubrics, so then they can compare them, see which is best, and to see why one is better than the other. Okay. One of the main problems with rubrics very often is that we try to put too much information instead of breaking it down. For something like this, for example, I'd probably say, read the sentences and circle the correct form of the verb. Then I'd have the exercise, and then after the exercise, the rest of the instructions. Now I'm going to show you a couple of the sentences that go with this rubric. And this throws up another problem. Obviously, here the students are practicing the difference between the present simple and the present continuous. They're talking about going to school by bus and doing homework, so they're probably children. Probably got a low level. Look at the rubric. Have you chosen the same sentences? Present perfect. Will they understand the rubric? One of the biggest problems that we have, well, materials writers very often, one thing to bear in mind always is that the rubric should always be at a lower level than the materials, or the same level, but certainly not higher. And again, this simplicity idea coming back, okay? Okay, another and the final thing in my quality, a list of 8, is logical sequencing. Again, it comes back to the same, that the lesson plan design, okay, that we're flipping over to use with the materials. So I've got 4 exercises here. We will imagine that the students are learning about vocabulary, clothes, okay? With the person next to you, I would like you to decide which would be the logical sequence for these exercises to be done. Okay, you got the same as me? Okay, so yeah, obviously what we're doing here and what your teachers will hopefully be doing, it's a great exercise actually to get a course book, copy the sequencing of exercises, the rubrics, without the content, just write them all down, shuffle them up, give them to your trainee teachers and ask them to put them in a logical sequence. Because what they're doing there, they're not just thinking about materials writing again, they're thinking about the language, they're thinking about the expectations of the students. So for the first one, for example, all they have to do, they have a visual support, they're matching, they don't have to write anything, they don't have to say anything, and it's the simplest. And by a process of elimination, they'll get there. And then, of course, with the second one, they've got the support of the words in the box. So it's more support, and then gradually it becomes freer. You can see that, you can understand that. And for you, as with me, it's a logical sequence. But it's something that for some people is very, very difficult to get their heads around. So I think that's something to look at and, again, notice. Okay, now we're going to have a look at a step-by-step approach to actually creating materials. This is the way I go about creating materials for my own classes. And this is the guide, if you like, that I would give to my teachers to create materials for their classes. So, first, we need to select or create some content. Some people like to use authentic materials without changing them at all. Some people prefer to adapt them. It doesn't matter. I think there's a place for everything, yeah? I've divided this up into 4 because core content comes as an image, as a text, as an audio, or as a video, moving pictures. Here are some examples, but that list could have gone on and on and on, okay? So what we were talking about before, noticing things. The next thing, if your teacher chooses a particular text, for example, for their students, it's because they know that the students are going to be interested in the content of that text. But when we look at a text in detail, very often we notice other things that are in that text that it would be a shame not to exploit. So this is where noticing comes in. So we might have a text and we might notice there might be some functional language, there might be a lot of words, a lot of prefixes, for example. You might notice opportunities for pronunciation. The noticing continues very often. Sometimes you even get into the class and you suddenly notice something else that's great to use, to exploit. Sometimes you might notice opportunities for things like discussion. So if a text is given a very strong opinion of something, that would be a good opportunity for discussion, role plays, etc. So I think what we have to do is encourage our teachers to notice, notice, notice. This happens naturally. Put your hands up if you find yourself listening to a song and instead of enjoying it, thinking, oh, wow, he's been using the passive all the way through. That would be brilliant for... Yeah, that's what happens. We notice things, don't we? Newspapers. Oh, that'd be really good for my senior level 3 class. Well, we notice things. This is an extension. We have to make our teachers notice things. I'm giving you a couple of examples now. This is a text. Can you see that? That's the menu from the cafe round the corner. Because I wanted to choose something that was in the context here. I'm trying to say that anything can be used as a text for materials. So with the person next to you, what do you notice about that text that might be useful to exploit in the classroom? Just have a little chat with the person next to you. Give you a minute. Okay, I'm going to pause you there. I know I haven't given you much time. I apologize. I'm not going to do this now, but if we had a bit more time, I would ask different people what they'd noticed, and I'm sure that there will be things that everybody's noticed, the obvious things, yeah, food vocabulary, etc., and there will be things that people will have noticed that the rest of you haven't, yeah, other things. And this obviously can be exploited in 100 different ways. But if you have a group of teachers and you give them something like this, you put them into groups and you say, what would you exploit with this? What language? What would you do with it? Imagine if you have 5 groups, you might have 5 different ideas, okay? Which is great. This is an example of an audio, but I've just given you the transcript. I've taken this from the Learn English website because they've got some really good podcasts and listening skills development materials on there. Obviously, in a classroom, the students wouldn't see this, or they might if you chose to show them. So, but with a teachers group, I would give them an audio script in exactly the same way as a text and say, what do you notice? What can you do? So with this one, for example, there are very clearly times they practice in, this kind of thing, and probably other things that I haven't noticed myself. So again, it's all about noticing. This is an example of an image. One of the great ironies in my life is that as a teacher, my favorite lessons are those that require no materials. But I make my living as a materials writer, so I hope I'm in the, I hope there aren't too many people thinking along those lines. But I think that sometimes we try to do too much with materials, and pictures are fantastic. Pictures are fantastic. I've put this example so that I can show you where it's from. Put your hands up if you know ELT Pics. Okay, a couple of people know. It's a resource on the internet. You put ELT Pics. It's made by teachers for teachers. You can use the materials in class, and you can upload your photos. Your teachers can get engaged and upload their photos and add them to the different sets. They're categorized, yeah? Houses, food, travel, etc. And you can use any of them with your classes, as long as you say where you get it from, obviously. They make it quite easy for you, actually, because they actually tell you, please write this. If you use this material, write this on the bottom. And it's what I've put there. So here's a picture. Just tell the person next to you, how might you use this with a class? Just tell the person next to you, if you feel inspired. Okay, apologies for stopping you again so swiftly. And I'm sure that, again, if you did this with a group of teachers, you'd have 100 ideas. One of the things I like personally doing with pictures is this. So it's to practice question forms. I don't know about your students or your teacher students. My students used to have huge problems formulating questions. It's complicated. So here, if they write these questions, so Canada, obviously they might say, where is the house? It's quite simple, yeah? Cold and windy, what's the weather like, yeah? There might be a number of different questions, correct. So that would be used for a low level, lowish level. Exactly the same picture, exactly the same rubric. Now I've got different answers. What have I done? I've put it all in the past tense. So it's the same, but now we're practicing question forms in the past tense. Okay? So you can ask your teachers to think about creating an activity to go with a picture, and then when they've done that, to tell them to adapt it to another level. Again, it's noticing, it's thinking. And at the end of the day, if you can use the same materials for lots of different lessons, well, great, no? Makes life a bit easier. Okay, so finally, when we've got the content, when we've visualized, we've noticed, we've extracted the language that we want to practice, and then we just plan the materials around the content. We organize it, we think about, so for example, if we have a text, Are we going to put the whole text on the page with some questions after? Are we going to break the text up? Are we going to give all the students all of the text, or are we going to give some of them a part of it and some of them another part of it? Are we going to put our core materials on a worksheet, or are we going to have that separate and then have another worksheet? All of these are questions to consider, and there is no right or wrong answer. There's no right or wrong answer. The beauty of creating materials is that you have, or your teachers will have, quite a lot of opportunities to be creative and a certain amount of autonomy as well, which is great. And then when you've finished, this is a little checklist that hopefully for your teachers will become a sort of mental, just automatic checklist, if you like, to run through. Okay. So, in this last part, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about these Learn English materials that I mentioned earlier. The British Council have produced, lots of work goes on the internet, and there's loads of materials online. There's a whole wealth of materials, and we invest money in technology, we create more materials online, and it's fantastic. But in some contexts, people don't want online materials, people want paper. And that's not only in contexts where you don't have a good internet connection, because I worked in Spain in a British Council centre with fantastic internet connection, but the teachers I work with there always wanted a piece of paper, yeah? So we've created a series of teacher training materials. They are standalone materials. We'll have a look at a little bit later. We've chosen 12 key 21st century skills and competencies that teachers need. And we've created the materials around them, and they are to be used in teacher training sessions. They are available on the British Council stand. Okay, you can go there. And if you want to get more to use on your teacher training programs, speak to the British Council and they will tell you how you can get them, because they're free and they're really good. They're really well designed. This is why they're good. Okay, the evidence again. Rod Balaithos, ask for evidence. Okay, I'm giving you evidence. So they're standalone. So if you've got a session for 2 hours with a group of teachers on Friday, you can just do that. You don't have to do anything before, after. You don't have to think about building up a whole thing. Or you can use all of them over a series of 12 weeks or whatever, but each one is standalone. They're linked to existing modules in some teacher training courses. Things like critical thinking, interaction, etc. They already exist in other modules. So it's really good for supplementary materials. The level is good. We've written these at a level of about B1 according to the Common European Framework. So, so that teachers, even if the teacher has a much higher level of English, it doesn't matter. It means that the teachers with a lower level of English can also use them and access them. There's a really good balance of theory and practice. It gives you the theory, and then it gives you a practical idea to take into the classroom, try out with your students. So that's quite good. It offers I think it's a perfect model of a very simple material, if you like. So it gives a good model to copy for others. It's accessible, they've thought of that. And it promotes critical thinking and self-reflection. There are questions at the end to think about and discuss with colleagues, other teachers. So I would encourage you to go to the British Council stand and get some. Okay, so just to think a little bit about continued professional development for your teachers, I think that there is a really good, valid argument to spend some time on materials writing and development. Get them to look at existing materials with a critical eye. Doesn't mean to say finding fault with everything. What's good, what's bad, why doesn't it work? Look at the rubrics, look at the sequencing. Some course books are brilliant, they're perfect. Some are terrible. And it's good to know what's wrong and to be able to say and recognize what's wrong. Try out materials, get the teachers to try out materials and keep a journal. What worked, what didn't work, of their own materials, yeah, with a portfolio. Show and tell. That's my favorite kind of teacher training, show and tell. It's my favorite because everybody's equal. If you have a show and tell experience, nobody's there telling you what to do. Everybody's equal and everybody's valid. Everybody's valid. Form partnerships. I've put this in bold because it's another of my favorites. When I say form partnerships, big institutions form partnerships across countries, across cities. Individuals need to form partnerships too. I'm going to ask you to do one more little thing, just for a second. I'm going to read out a list of 8 things, and I want you to count on your fingers, if you like, each time the answer is yes. Okay? So, oh, my glasses, them off. Okay. Put your hands up, or count on your hands. Are you good at drawing? Are you good at drawing? Just count on your hand. Okay, so some people have 1. Are you good at photography? Okay, count on your hand. Are you good at writing stories? But count on your hand. Are you good at cooking? Okay. Number 5, are you good at making cakes? Okay. Next one, are you good at organizing people? Okay. The next one, are you good at singing? And the last one, are you good at playing a musical instrument? Okay. Okay. Put your hand up if you answered yes to all of those questions, 8 questions. I challenge you. Put your hand up, put your hand up. Nobody, nobody. Okay, we're not going to do this now because we haven't got time, but I guarantee you, and I'm absolutely sure of this, and you can do it with your teachers, if I put you into a group of 6, 5, I don't know, between you, you will answer yes to all of those questions. Okay, we might not be cooking and making cakes and singing and playing instruments with our students, but there are other skills that some of us have and some of us don't have. And when you're creating materials, it's really fantastic to do it with somebody else, because I'm hopeless at drawing, for example, absolutely hopeless. So if I've got somebody making materials with me who's good at drawing, that is brilliant, because we can work together and we can make some flashcards, we can make some things. She can do the drawing, I'll do the something else, the design, and between us we will come out with some pretty good materials, and we will learn from each other at the same time. And I think collaboration is the key, and working together is the key, and I don't think teachers should be left alone to do things like this. I think they should work with others, 1 other person, 2 other people, etc. Okay. And then set up a materials writing group. Start small. When I say start small, 2 of you. Get a friend. Go to the cafe, get some tea, sit down and talk about some materials. Write some, share some. Okay? Attend workshops. Find a place to share materials. It might be online, on a blog, or in the cloud somewhere. It might be in a bag on the table. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Sharing is the key, again. We don't want to keep everything to ourselves. If we're greedy and we keep everything to ourselves, how can we expect anybody to share anything with us? If we share and we offer things to other people, then they will share with us, and you will get 10 times more. Yeah, that's another message. Attend workshops, webinars. They have some online now, more and more, for materials writers, or organize your own workshop. Okay. I've got 10 minutes, or maybe 8 minutes. I'm sorry I rushed through a few things, but I wanted to be able to leave a little bit of time for any questions that you might have. So, Please put your hands up if you have a question, and I'll be happy to try to answer.
Thank you. We're going to pass the mic around. Please speak into the mic. Thank you.
Thank you for the brilliant session. Just a question about what is your take on dogma?
What is my take on dogma? I find it exciting and I love it, but I would never. With trainee teachers, they're terrified. The first time I ever told a group of teachers about the concept of dogma, they were horrified because they want their lesson plan, and also what somebody mentioned in a talk yesterday. Unfortunately, or fortunately, for good or bad, we are very exam orientated. Dogma's fine, but if we've got to do an exam at the end of the year. But I would say there's always a place, maybe for 1 hour in one lesson, for 20 minutes in one lesson, for 10 minutes in one lesson. Try it out. See how it goes. Sorry, do we need a... Sorry, the gentleman here and then the lady. Yeah?
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I was involved with materials writing. Could I ask you a question?
Yes, of course.
Regarding your personal use of material. To what extent were you free to use your own material? Because in our system, teachers are rarely given the opportunity to use materials. They are discouraged from using their own material.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
Because most of these schools insist on prescribed texts. And
Okay.
any deviation from the use of other material is
It's
dissuaded.
frowned upon. Okay.
Unless teachers are given the liberty to use their own material, especially at the primary level.
Okay, so there's an imbalance there, isn't there?
Yes. What's your experience and how far do you succeed? You taught in Spain?
Well, my teaching context is in Spain in a British council, and okay, comments on that. It's a very interesting, We had to use a course book, and we had to follow a course book, and also from a personal point of view. If the parents have bought that course book and paid a lot of money for that course book, then I have to justify that expense and I will use the course book. Of course I will. But that doesn't mean that I don't maybe create some materials to supplement that course book or for homework task. So maybe not use your own materials all the time for every class. That would be probably impractical and frowned upon. But maybe, again, a 15-minute material task to supplement the course book, etc. Okay, but not just go in with all your materials and throw all the course book. No, because obviously we have to follow the rules. Okay, do you want? Okay, you tell me, and then I'll tell the.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, and then here and...
Good afternoon, ma'am. Myself, Divakar, and I'm very pleased to be part of your presentation.
Thank you.
And I've been working on worksheets and exercises since years. And I have a lot of worksheets, for example. Can I upload anything, such websites are there, where I can upload my worksheets which I have made for the students?
There are lots of blogs and lots of places online now where you can share materials with colleagues, and there's a lot of that kind of thing going on. My email's here. Why don't you send me an email and I'll tell you where you can find that information. Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Rajendra Singh. I've been a teacher, college teacher for about 30 years, and I teach in a typical examination-oriented situation. There's one thing, we can create additional material just to supplement our teaching, but students may somehow feel, that the content is unrelated. Why should we study it? We should focus more on our examination questions.
Okay, my response to that would be, why not create supplementary materials that are helping to practice exam materials? So supplementary material doesn't necessarily mean to say it doesn't have an exam focus. So for example, if I used to teach a lot of students preparing for the first certificate exam, and sometimes I would prepare specific materials that would help them with word building exercise, for example, of that. And I would say to the students, this is something that is in your exam. Tell them, be explicit about it so that they know.
Make them more ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Could you please could you please share as to how we get to copyright our materials? I've heard of the Creative Commons license, but I don't know how to get one for the materials that I create.
I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question, in all honesty, so I'm very sorry I'm not able to help you with that one. But if you'd like to send me an email, please do, and I will find somebody who does know about copyright, and I will tell you, because I've got some friends who know a lot more than me about that. So please write to me and ask me that question, and I'll tell you the answer.
Thanks, Catherine, for a wonderful presentation. My
Thank
question
you.
is about when you create materials like textbooks, like not at the level of activities and like worksheets in the classroom. For example, in books such as Cutting Edge and English File, they use certain frameworks. Like in English File, they use PPP, or situational presentation by Jim Scrivener.
Yeah,
It's just an example. Or Cutting Edge, they use task-based learning.
Yeah.
But as a teacher, or even as a materials producer, I want to use, I don't believe in methods like in one particular framework. Do I need to be consistent as far as frameworks are concerned?
Very
For example,
good.
I believe in
question.
both product and process. Sometimes I want to combine. Sometimes I believe in deconstructive and reconstructive way of writing. I want to integrate both. I want to use
Should I be consistent? I think Rod Politho said, didn't he, in his, I think all good teachers have an eclectic approach to teaching. And I will stand up and say that to everybody. You might like this approach, you might like this approach. Some approaches work for some teachers sometimes, for some students other times. And I think an eclectic approach. I think it's great to pick and choose and do the communicated stuff and the task-based stuff. As much
as a teacher,
variety.
yes, but as a materials producer, for example, these books, they are very consistent.
Most books, what happens when we write a course book is the writer, the author, we don't normally have much input into the initial ideas about that book. Market research is what pushes things, okay? Market research. Teachers have a part in that, of course, because what happens is the publishers go to schools, they speak to teachers, they say, what do you want? What do you like? What do you like about this? What do you like? They get all that, they spend a fortune on market research. They get big teams, they take years. They analyze the results and they say, okay, teachers here, they really want a task-based book, or that's how it works.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We've actually run out of time, but Katherine is around today and tomorrow as well. So please feel free to ask her more questions.
Come and find me. I can't run away because I've got a broken foot. So just catch me. I can't get very far anyway.
That's right. I know we have some very interesting...
Target.
Sorry, thank you. I know we have some very interesting questions, and sorry, we have to close now. It's already time for lunch. But please feel free to contact her at the end of the session. As a token of our appreciation and gratitude to Katherine, we'd like to give her a small memento. May I invite one of the participants, Mr. Anil, please could you give her a memento? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of all of us here and the organizers.
Thank you very much. That's
Thank you for coming
fantastic.
to
Thank you so much. And thank you for noticing my very first mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone, for being here.
My pleasure.